Okay, everybody, welcome to the 2020 Louisiana Farm to School Conference virtually everywhere. We're going to get started with our intro and welcome today. If there's anything that you guys can't hear or can't see, please let us know in the chat. We also want to remind you that there is a Q&A function there, so if you have any questions, just go ahead and hit Q&A, send us a question, and we'll be able to address those at the end of our session during the live Q&A with our speakers. Also, you guys should have the conference program. It should have been sent to you via email, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat now, and you should be able to either click on that or copy and paste, and that it's full of links and resources for the entire conference and everything that you need for today. But we're going to go ahead and get started with our conference videos.
Welcome to the 2020 Louisiana Farm to School Conference. I am Carl Matzenbacher, Executive Director of the Louisiana Farm to School Program and a Professor of Horticulture at LSU. This year's conference theme is virtually everywhere, as Farm to School is everywhere in Louisiana, reaching students, teachers, parents, farmers, and others, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. This year's conference is virtual and online, and we will have the same great content you have come to expect from our annual event, including knowledgeable speakers, inspiring sessions, and farm-to-school resources only in a new format. Instead of a one full-day in-person conference, we are pleased to present 4 conference days of 2 hours each session, each starting at 10 a.m. We will also have taste testings of Harvest of the Month recipes on 2 days that you can participate from home. This will be on Thursdays at noon. We are encouraging everyone to participate virtually each day. If you are unable to make the conference sessions, they are being recorded and will be available later. Check our website for this information. October is Farm to School Month and the time to celebrate farm to school in our state and to bring together practitioners. This year, we will once again have the Farm to School Challenge. We encourage everyone to take part in the challenge again this year. More details are available on our website and our Facebook page. I would also like to thank the Farm to School Conference Steering Committee for providing valued guidance and a great effort on this year's conference. Also to our program sponsors, the USDA and the Louisiana Department of Education. And an extra special thanks to our speakers who are supporting the Farm to School movement in Louisiana by sharing their knowledge and stories. Thank you everyone for participating in the 2020 Farm to School Conference.
Hi, my name is Melissa Campbell, and I'm the Farm to School Liaison for the Louisiana Department of Education. I wanted to take a few moments to give you some of the history behind the Farm to School program in Louisiana. The Louisiana Farm to School program began with the preparation of a plan by the LSU Agricultural Center to expand knowledge of, access to, and opportunities for local farmers and growers. Around that same time, the Louisiana Department of Education had a growing interest in and was in the position to fund farm to school activities. A bill enacted by the 2016 Louisiana legislature provided the catalyst needed to bring the two organizations together and move preparation and opportunity toward action and growth. The Louisiana Department of Education and the LSU Agricultural Center, through the formation of a partnership, have built the foundations of farm to school in Louisiana. But this is only the beginning, sowing the seeds of what we hope will become a thriving network of countless organizations and people across our state. The people representing the farms, the schools, the businesses, and the communities are the caretakers of farm to school and will ultimately define what it can and will become. The 4 years since the inception of the Louisiana Farm to School program have been challenging ones. Our state has faced a historic flood, a global pandemic, and most recently, Hurricane Laura, which left a path of destruction in its wake. It has been stated that opportunity can be found in the midst of chaos. The idea of a virtual farm to school conference is exactly that. The great state of Louisiana continues to face challenges, from the economy to the weather to the pandemic. And yet, our people are both resilient and resourceful. Regardless of the challenge, innovative solutions are identified and implemented. Opportunities to rethink and reimagine the what, when, where, and how of each moment seem to bring out the best in us. And as long as we continue to give Louisiana the best of us, its people, success is inevitable. Welcome to the conference.
Good morning. My name is Gina Eubanks. I am an Associate Vice President with the LSU Ag Center. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Ag Center this morning. Gathering in person with teachers, farmers, child nutrition directors, chefs, policymakers, cafeteria workers is not possible this year because of the pandemic, and we want to ensure the health and safety of everyone. While this is our 5th year for the conference, our theme for that first year was connecting farmers, schools, and community. The theme for this year is virtually everywhere. I'm willing to bet that in this virtual world of this conference today, we have teachers, farmers, child nutrition educators, chefs, policymakers, government representatives, and they come from everywhere, and they're going to participate in this 4-day conference. The first year, we also had a 4-day, 1-day conference where we went throughout the state and had a culminating conference here in Baton Rouge. In 2020, we're also having a 4-day conference that will be virtually everywhere. As you participate in this conference, think about the things that the Farm to School program stands for, or the goals that we have for our Farm to School program. We want to increase a student's ability to get healthy, local foods by linking schools with local farmers and producers. Also, we want to enhance the students' knowledge of agriculture through classroom work, through school gardens, field trips to farms, cooking demonstration, and food tasting. Now, granted, this year, during the pandemic, we may not be able to do that because some schools are hybrid models, some are virtually, and so we will be able to do this in the coming years. But I'm willing to say to you, over the 5 years that we've been doing the conference, student win, school wins, farmers win, and the community wins. But I'd like to say to you, as you go throughout this conference, this 4-day conference, please remember that from farm to fields to warehouses to schools to grocery stores, the people who grow, pick, process, deliver, and sell our food are essential. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope this finds you all well wherever you are and all things considered in the world these days. I want to start by thanking our conference hosts. We have amazing partners working on Farm to School and on this conference in Louisiana. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all this morning and to provide the keynote address. My name is Helen Dombalis, and I serve as Executive Director of the National Farm to School Network. I'm based in North Carolina. And I'll share with you that I have a long history of working with Farm to School and with the National Farm to School Network going back to 2010, so a decade now. I've been working in Farm to School, and I'll talk more about this later because I've been able to see the long history of the work that we've done, and that has given me perspective on where we've been and where we can head from here. So the conference theme, as you all know, is virtually everywhere. And of course, that's necessary this year given the global pandemic. We are all doing things a bit differently than we otherwise would for this reason of COVID-19. But what I want to do today with this keynote is talk about how, even though right now this conference and other conferences and events need to be virtually everywhere, really what we need to do as we learn to adapt to COVID-19 is make Farm to School truly everywhere. So with that, I'm going to begin by talking about gaps in our food system to give us a perspective on what's happening right now, and that will help inform where we head from here. So what's it going to take to have Farm to School everywhere? There are numerous gaps in our food system, and we're going to have to tackle these. So As you can see on the slide, there are gaps in our food system that disproportionately impact some individuals, families, and communities more than others. And these inequities are based on race, place, class, so race and ethnicity, place or geography, class and income. And ultimately, we need systemic change in order to realize social transformation and address things like income gaps and gender inequalities. So let's get into some examples. Taking geography as a factor, where you live impacts access to nutritious food. So in particular, access to healthy food is a challenge most pronounced in low-income communities of color, and disparities exist in the quality, the variety, the quantity, and the price of food available. Considering impacts on health, more than 1 in 5 children in the U.S. are at risk of hunger, and among Blacks and Latinos, that number is 1 in 3. Black and Latino youth also have substantially higher rates of childhood overweight and obesity than do their white peers. And then Native Americans are twice as likely as white people to lack access to safe, healthy foods, which ultimately leads to higher obesity and diabetes rates. So those are some examples for you around race, food access, and health that you can hear reflected in hunger, in obesity, and diabetes rates, so diet-related diseases. I also want to talk about the fact that the gaps in our food system are not just about the consumers or the eaters. Many food system workers take home poverty level wages, with women, Blacks, and Latinos most likely to earn the lowest wages. And then another way to look at our food system and the gaps in our food system is not just about the consumption, and it's not just about the employees or the workers in the food system, but it's about land ownership, which is another important factor for income. Latinos, American Indians, and Alaska Natives, Blacks, and Asians make up less than 4% of landowners overall. So, in other words, 96% or more than 96% of land owned in the U.S. for production is owned by white people. And these outcomes span urban, rural, tribal settings and are a result of inequities that have really been built into the structures of our systems. So now let's look at how all of this plays out in the U.S. This is data from Feeding America's Map the Meal Gap 2020 report. I do want y'all to keep in mind this is data from 2018 that came out in 2020. So what you're seeing is pre-COVID-19. We'll talk more about COVID later, but of course we know the global pandemic has worsened gaps for many people in many places. So what you're seeing here is 5 counties in the U.S. that fall into the top 10% both for food insecurity and for meal costs. So as you can see, one of these 5 is right there in Louisiana, in Orleans. And what that means is that the gaps and inequities are compounded. So if you're already struggling with poverty, the high cost of food makes it that much more difficult to turn things around. Sometimes it'll mean choosing between food and housing, for example, and it means living day to day, not having the ability to save or plan for tomorrow. And you can also see that those with the highest cost of food have lower rates of home ownership. So there's really a ripple effect of the gap in the food system that are significant and that go beyond the food system. That's really what I want to, before we go to the next slide, point out and hammer home for you all is that these gaps in the food system are not really just gaps in the food system. As you all know, the food system is complex and it's related to all these other aspects of society and living. So y'all are in Louisiana, so let's dig into these gaps in your state specifically to contextualize the situation a bit more. So food insecurity is USDA's measure of lack of access at times to enough food for an active, healthy life for all household members, and limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate foods. So food insecure households aren't necessarily always food insecure. It may, reflect a trade-off, as I was saying earlier, between important basic needs like housing or medical bills and purchasing nutritionally adequate food. So I'm going to give y'all a minute to take a look at the statistics on this slide. You can see they're focused on hunger and food insecurity. So in other words, I wanted to focus on these in Louisiana because what you can see here is the food system is not working if some people cannot meet the basic human right to food. And that's really what these hunger statistics are showing us. So I know that was troubling day to start out for the keynote. I did that because we have to know what we're up against. The food system we have right now was built with these massive gaps in it. And if we're going to tackle those gaps, we have to be aware of the challenges in order to overcome them, in order to make farm to school and a food system that works for everyone, everywhere. So now I want to turn to talking about farm to school, what this conference is all about, and of course why you all are here. What I don't want to do is suggest that farm to school alone is going to solve poverty, hunger, obesity, and the myriad other societal challenges that we're facing in the food system and across society. As I said earlier, those issues have been built into our systems and our policies, and it's going to take changing those to overcome the challenges. But what we do know is that farm to school is part of the solution. So what is farm to school? First, I'll say that you may be doing farm to school already and not even know it. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in farm to school for more than a decade, and one of the most common myths I've run across in my farm to school career is that people don't even realize they're doing farm to school. So I wanted to start here as we start to think ahead about things that you all can do. When we say farm to school, we're talking about all the activities that support the connection communities have with fresh, nutritious food and local food producers, and ways that really engage kids in learning about food and agriculture. It's important for y'all to know there's no one defined program, but collectively farm to school activities empower kids and their families to make informed food choices. They know about food and where it comes from, and it strengthens local economies and of course contributes to vibrant communities. And we'll dig into that and some examples more in a moment. So although there's no one defined program for farm to school, there are what we call core elements of farm to school, and those combine to make success in farm to school. So first is that literal farm to school. So that's where local products are purchased, promoted, and served in the cafeteria as a snack or a taste test. So that really is that farm to school component. So getting local Louisiana products into Louisiana school meal and child nutrition programs. Second is gardens. So these are opportunities for kids to engage in hands-on learning through gardening. Obviously, when kids are engaged in experiential learning, they're going to retain more of it. And then lastly is education. And this is really food and agriculture education, where kids are participating in activities related to their food system, nutrition, agriculture, such as doing taste tests, taking kids out to a farm, bringing farmers to a classroom or a cafeteria. All of the ways that food and agriculture can be incorporated into curriculum. So that was the what, and then this is the why. This is why farm to school is part of the solution. We call it the triple win of farm to school. So kids win, farmers win, and communities win. So I want to give you all some examples, and my favorite fact sheet, and this is one of the resources shared with attendees of the conference, is the Benefits of Farm to School fact sheet. It's essentially a literature review of the research that's been done. So we know through research that kids who participate in farm to school eat more servings of fruits and veggies, and it makes sense. If they've grown it, if they've met the farmer, they're going to be more willing to taste it, try it, and like it. When you shorten the supply chain, farmers keep a bigger share of the dollar. And it makes sense. When you're having less points of connection between the farm and the school, you're going to have an opportunity to keep more of those resources in the community and to support the farmer or the producer. And then communities win because those dollars get reinvested in the local community, but also the research shows that kids take what they learn home with them. And you see that reflected in home eating habits. And then of course, their impacts to educators and to school nutrition staff. And the point here is really that farm to school doesn't need to be something new or different from what you're already doing. It's a tool or it's a strategy to help you all in your various roles to accomplish the goals that you already have. So as you all are gathering, farm to school, of course, sits at this intersection very uniquely of a lot of sectors. And so there are these cross-sectoral benefits to public health, to education. So academic achievement in the classroom is improved, which makes sense. If kids are eating more nutritiously, they're going to perform better academically. economic development, the environment. So there are a lot of different reasons that farm to school is part of the solution here to addressing those gaps that we talked about earlier. So we hear a lot these days about equality and the need for everyone to have the same thing, regardless of skin color, where they live, or any other factor. And that's true. We are all people who have families. We have hope for our future. We need the same love. We feel the same pain. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I talk to her about this a lot. We're all people who at the end of the day want the same things for ourselves and our families and our communities today and tomorrow. But the importance is that in order to achieve equality, where everyone has the same thing, we have to strive for equity. And what I mean by that is that equity is investing in what people need, meaning different people have different needs. So we saw in the earlier slide the gaps in our food system nationally and then in Louisiana. And so what that means is that some people have more significant basic needs to be met than other people do. So equity-centered strategies, including equity-centered farm to school, means recognizing that different people are going to need different things in order to meet those basic needs and to fully realize the benefits that we just talked about at farm to school. So at the National Farm to School Network, we invest in equity-centered strategies. And I want to go through some examples to give you ideas of what you could take away from this presentation. So let's go back to those 3 core elements of farm to school. First, procurement of local food. So you could provide access to more nutritious school meals. Right now, we know that school meals are reaching more than 24 million students. But what it also does when you're buying local food through these meal programs is advancing income generation and access to land ownership for marginalized food producers. So in other words, we know how large our food system is, and I'm talking about in terms of the number of people that are served and that are part of the food system, but also the number of dollars being spent. So if you look alone, let's say at the National School Lunch Program, we're talking about $14 billion a year. So we can invest more of those dollars in local purchasing. And what that means is we're going to start shifting some of those gaps that we talked about earlier. So shifting who is getting financial resources from that National School Lunch Program and investment. And then that impacts things like access to land ownership. Remember earlier that I mentioned less than 4% of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color have land ownership for production in this country. Going to school gardens as the second core element of farm to school, that's an opportunity for students to develop a sense of responsibility and connection to their community. It's not just about digging or raising bees or, raising chickens or eggs. It's about fostering engagement and partnership through those connections, both in the school setting and outside the school setting. And then looking at the third core element, education about food and farming, it's a proven approach for elevating the value of local agriculture and lifting up underrepresented stakeholders in the food system. So as you can see on the slide, when farm to school is equity centered, the benefits are many, and that includes linkages between schools and communities, particularly in low-income communities and communities of color, a student appreciation for and knowledge of diverse cultures and customs, as well as engagement of diverse families in school activities, and combating racial and economic inequities in the school food system. So to give you a couple more examples around that second bullet point, think about the fact that Indigenous communities have traditional foods such as bison or blue corn. They're different, of course, to every community, but one of the ways to incorporate equity-centered farm to school is to actually focus on using and bringing those culturally relevant and traditional foods into school meal programs when you have an Indigenous population so that those meals are more relevant to them. So there are lots of ways that you can consider incorporating equity-centered farm to school into your programs. So now that we've talked about what farm to school is and why it matters, I want to look at where farm to school is. So this is really the where of farm to school. And in order to make it everywhere, as I said, I wanted to address this keynote, we need to know what the current picture looks like. So the Louisiana Farm to School program, as you all are aware, is designed to increase access to fresh local foods while strengthening the local communities and economy. So it's, those benefits that I already talked about. And funding for that program is through the U.S. Department of Ag, an interagency agreement with LSU's Ag Center and Louisiana Department of Education Division of Nutrition Services. So I'll talk about this more in a moment, but you will have a very holistic approach to farm to school in Louisiana, which is phenomenal. As I said earlier, farm to school really is a cross-sectoral approach to addressing our food system. So farm to school activities help strengthen school meal and child nutrition programs like National School Lunch Program. We're bringing more students to the lunch line and increasing fruit and vegetable consumption. And the research shows this. Again, we actually know that meal participation rates go up and you have more paid kids participating in these programs when you're engaging in farm to school activities. And the statistics on the slide there, as well as the map, are from the USDA Farm to School Census, which is data compiled from school districts across the state and the nation. So 33% of Louisiana school districts, as of the last census a couple of years ago, participate in farm to school. So that's 31 districts with 531 schools and 288,083 students. And across the state, educators, food service professionals, growers are collaborating around farm to school to increase equity, break down those gaps, and improve health outcome for students and advance those economic opportunities. So the farm to school program that you all have, I'm confident, because of its strong base, both in the what and why of farm to school, is going to continue to support the growth of the farm to school movement going forward. So here's another way to look at farm to school in Louisiana. This is data from the National Farm to School Network. We look at 3 measures of success for growing and sustaining farm to school, and that's state farm to school networks, state positions for farm to school, so in university extension and state agencies, and then third, state policy. So Louisiana and many states, as you can see there on the map, do not have all 3 of these in place yet. So the darker colored states are the states that have a funded full-time state farm to school position, a funded state policy, and a state network. So Louisiana does have a state network. You all have an amazing program. You have a policy supporting your state program, and then you have a part-time position within extension that works on farm to school. So you all are certainly on the path to having all 3 of these measures of success that we consider at National Farm to School Network for growing and sustaining farm to school. So now that I've talked about gaps in our food system and how things are going with farm to school in Louisiana, I want to make sure you know about the National Farm to School Network and how we're here to support you. So as you can see on the slide, we're a network of more than 20,000 members. We've got more than 200 what we call core and supporting partners across the country. So that includes the conference host, an advisory board, national staff, myself included. And I just want to make sure you know, as I go into these next few slides about what we do, that if you're not a member yet, you can join us. It's free to join. You can go to farmtoschool.org. And then here's what we do and how we do it. And this is all about movement building. So looking at the benefits of farm to school and a growing trajectory of farm to school being in more places over time. Systems change. So going back earlier to what I said about the fact that there are gaps in our food system and we know that we have to work systemically in order to address those. And advocacy, knowing that there are policies that have actually created and impacted those gaps. And so we have to be advocates in order to help mitigate and address those gaps as well. So there's so many people involved in farm to school, and so we exist to connect and support all of them. So that's farmers and educators and school nutrition staff and parents and the students themselves. So what we do is connect people to information and resources, people to each other, and then people to policy opportunities. And then you can see here our mission and vision, the 3 core elements of farm to school and that triple win benefit. If you're still at this point thinking, about how Farm to School may best support you in your role, consider the many benefits that Farm to School offers that we've been talking about. What I don't want you all to do is take away from this that engaging in Farm to School is something new or different. Everybody is busy enough, and certainly right now with all that we're facing with the global pandemic and as a nation, the idea is for you all to see that Farm to School supports the goals that you already have. So if you're a teacher and you have standards for your classroom and academic achievement, Farm to School is going to help you to meet those goals that you already have. If you're a farmer and you are trying to, meet the bottom line needs that you have, selling into the school meal and child nutrition programs is going to be a way to get there. If you are a parent, Farm to School is an opportunity for family engagement. Kids, as I said earlier, bring what they learn home to their families and are excited about Farm to School because it's really giving them an opportunity to have agency and involvement in their food system, which is an incredible opportunity. And then there's our history, and So adaptation, of course, has been a big topic in 2020 with the global pandemic. As you all know, and we talked about earlier, there are tremendous gaps in our food system. COVID has only exacerbated these and shown a brighter light on the areas for needed effort. So as you can see here, lack of regional food system infrastructure has made it challenging to support local producers. There are unjust labor practices in our food system. There are folks that have limited access to fresh food and nutritious food. There's a lower distribution of relief funds to those that are most impacted. And then people of color, so Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are disproportionately represented on the front line response to COVID and as essential workers in our food system. So that's in grocery stores, that's in school meal programs, and so forth. So all of that means that people of color, as you all I'm sure have heard in the news, are dying at higher rates due to prevalence of underlying health conditions that put them at greater risk for death from COVID. And so again, I said earlier that the gaps in the food system are not just gaps in the food system, they have a ripple effect. And that's certainly the case here with COVID. I'll say specific to Louisiana, Carl shared that in the East Parish there are over 70 schools, and out of the 30,000 children that used to be fed, only about 4,500 are being fed right now because of the virtual learning setting. And that example is an example that we're hearing throughout Louisiana and across the country. A lot of kids relied on school meal programs as their only nutritious meal they were receiving each day. So going back to those gaps, we know that hunger exists in this country. We know that not everyone, based on a variety of factors, including where they live, what they look like, what their income is, don't have the opportunity, aside from school meals, to nutritious food. And because of COVID-19, obviously that's been impacted. We're hearing nationwide that up to 90% of kids that used to participate in school meal programs are now not getting those meals. So that has tremendous impacts on the well-being of kids today and as we continue to navigate the COVID pandemic in the months to come. So despite all of the challenges with our food system and with the global pandemic, there are moments of success and resilience. And that's what farm to school and community food systems are really about, is innovating. It's about creating opportunities to focus on relationships over transactions, to focus on building equity into our food system. So I want to go through some examples with you all that give me great hope. First, coming from West Virginia. The landscape of food and education, of course, changed quickly when COVID became a part of everybody's lives. Communities, of course, had to shift and make drastic changes as schools and businesses close. And innovation in West Virginia included making headway and not only continuing to provide meals for children across the state, but also maintaining markets for farmers and supporting food businesses. So sector lines have started to blur where communities came together to build and leverage resiliency in their food system. So West Virginia's Office of Child Nutrition partnered with communities to establish 505 feeding sites across the state. And the partnership is rooted in and made possible by bagged lunches from a variety of locations. So not only did the Office of Child Nutrition want to ensure kids were being fed, but they maintained highly nutritious meals while continuing to source locally. So with that example, it's a fact that even though learning and where kids were showing up changed, West Virginia's Office of Child Nutrition committed to continuing to purchase locally in order to build resilience in their local food system. The Common Market is another great example. Our board chair is one of the founders of the Common Market. COVID has obviously illuminated that our country is flawed in its food system and has always been when it comes to accessing fresh food. And this crisis has also illustrated that organizations with existing infrastructure, relationships, and investment in community food systems are able to adapt and respond. So Common Market is a mission-driven distributor of regional farm products. They partner with farmers and growers, city governments, school districts across the mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, and Texas to ensure that vulnerable communities receive fresh, healthy meals and to ensure that producers can continue business operations, pay workers, and meet community needs. And so the point here with Common Market's example is that they had already built a infrastructure for a regional supply chain. And so when COVID hit, they already knew the producers, they had the ability to aggregate, process, distribute products. So even if it wasn't necessarily going to a school the way the food had been, they were still able to make sure that the food was able to reach the children and the families and the communities that needed it because they had those other parts of the system in place. So again, this is just an example of how community food systems, when they really are set up across the supply chain, build in that opportunity for resilience to be able to survive and mitigate impacts of crises like this. And then another example I wanted to share with you all is donated seed packets. So partners of the National Farm to School Network in many states, including Ohio, North Carolina, Vermont, Wisconsin, are ensuring gardening and food and agriculture education, two of those core elements we talked about earlier, continue while students are at home. So donated seed packets and grow kits are being sent home in coordination with the emergency feeding programs. And at some school meal pickup locations in West Virginia, SNAP Ed educators are dropping off grow kits with food service staff to get packed into the lunches while mailing seed packets to families. So, and the point here again is about innovation and adaptation. They already had the connection to the students. They have connections to access seeds. And it's just about rerouting this opportunity for kids to learn about their food system, even though they may be learning at home. And then finally, STEAM Onward's Pharmacy Project provides youth with seeds, tilling services, gardening consultations. So just another example that I thought you all might want to hear about from Maryland of exploring that concept of really meeting people where they are by providing opportunities at home and in the community, even if folks are not at school. So as we start to wrap up, I want to share with you all information about getting involved and starting small. So as I said earlier, 2020 and the global pandemic are certainly impacting all of us in many ways, some more than others. And you all are busy as teachers and educators, as farmers and producers, as school nutrition staff and advocates and working at nonprofits, parents, students. So the thing that I like to most recommend, if I can recommend one thing, is to start small. So what this means is you can pick one product in Louisiana or pick one day this fall, for example, to get involved in trying out Farm to School. I know that in Louisiana, you all have a tremendous Harvest of the Month program started back in 2016, and that incorporates 16 different foods from the state, all fruits and veggies, plus catfish and shrimp. And it's one of the easiest ways to do farm to school is just to pick one menu item or do one taste test even with one of those products that are available through the Harvest of the Month program. And then coming up very soon is Farm to School Month. So October 1st marks Farm to School Month nationally. And in the great state of Louisiana, you will have the Satsuma Peel Challenge. And I encourage you to do that any day in October. So it's a great way to celebrate a local product. And if you can't get Satsumas, choose any product. The idea is just to pick something and to start small in October or whenever it works for you, to really give Farm to School a try to see how it supports the goals that you have and can help to break down some of the gaps in our food system. So I want to end with this quote because I love it. I come back to it a lot. It speaks to me. Just like seeds, change starts small. So if you've ever planted a seed, you know that they're tiny, they start small, and they grow into beautiful food that we can eat. And change is just like that. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So I hope I leave you all with an opportunity to recognize that though right now this conference is about being virtually everywhere, we can work collectively to make a difference and bring farm to school everywhere. Here's to closing the gaps in our food system and taking farm to school everywhere so that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from the many, many benefits of farm to school. I'll end by sharing an invitation with you all. The National Farm to School Network is hosting a virtual movement meeting October 14th about food justice being about racial justice. So we talked throughout this keynote about the gaps in our food system, including gaps based on skin color. And so on October 14th, we have this free, open to all event for a couple of hours to really dig into ways to actually start to tackle some of those gaps. And we'll be launching our strategic plan. So I hope you'll be able to join us. You can go to our website, farmtoschool.org, to register. And with that, I will pass it back to our conference host to go to questions. Thank you again for this opportunity and for all that you all are doing.
Okay, and we are back in our conference room. And we're ready for some live Q&A. But before that, we do have a poll, an icebreaker poll for everybody that I'm going to launch to you guys now, just to see where everybody is calling in from and how you're involved with Farm to School. So if you would take a second to go ahead and answer that poll, you'll see it large on your screen right now. Just go ahead and take a second to answer. We had a few questions submitted during the session that we're going to go ahead and ask. If you have any questions for Helen or anything about Farm to School, go ahead and submit that into the Q&A now, and we'll go ahead and get that answered. We have about 7 minutes before our break, and we'll try and go over all of this. You can minimize the poll after you are finished. So Johanna, you have a question from the audience.
Yeah, so Melissa Campbell, I believe, is on the video, and she works for the Department of Education here in Louisiana. We have a question. She can see it in the chat. There's a question about whether our state is going to provide funding for any schools who are buying local. And there's a couple of state examples, Michigan and New York are also doing this. So I will throw that question over and she can answer that for us.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yes, I did see that question. Emily, thank you so much. We would certainly love to see state funding appropriated for farm to school efforts. To do that, that would require that one of our legislators bring a bill before the legislature and have that passed to appropriate that funding. Unfortunately, the Department of Education cannot appropriate state funding. We would certainly, though, support any efforts, provide information as needed to anyone who is interested in going that route. Thank you.
This is Helen. Good morning, everyone. If you don't mind, I'll jump in on that question. It's one of my, I know it wasn't directed at me, but one of my favorite subjects, because it really is an opportunity to shift the system. So as the person who asked the question indicated, New York, Michigan, Oregon, there are a number of states that have started to do this. And as I said earlier in my keynote, this is one of the gold standards, if you will, for farm to school. The National Farm to School Network is more than happy if Louisiana advocates want to push for a policy like this. We are here to support you all the way with best practices and tools from other states that we've worked with towards this approach. It would be tremendous to see y'all do this.
Great, thank you. And I believe we have a question from Dr. Hodson.
Yes, yes, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Yes, so that there are some resources that would help us if we are interested in some additional funding so that our farmers can get a fair price for their products. And you say the National Farm to School Network can provide some assistance. I know other states have put links out with their information, but it would be good to get some additional help just so that we can maybe make that process a little smoother.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're here to help, and certainly I can follow up with the conference planning team about connecting you with our policy team that would be able to provide some of that support, everything from the messaging to draft legislation to kind of thinking through the strategy behind it. You know, the one thing I will say is that a lot of the few states that have done this so far have different approaches. New York certainly is putting the most money per meal into this. But I think a next step that I would encourage Louisiana to look at to this conversation that I just had in my keynote about these gaps is looking at that money, not going only to local. So not only to food miles, but to some of the other important values that you're wanting to invest in through additional money like this. So Dr. Hodson, you know, it sounds like you're indicating that you want to make sure, for example, farmers are getting a fair price. So that's something that you might want to write in to the legislation, is ensuring that any additional resources that are going to go to local incentives are going to, you know, meet X threshold for, fair price. So wanting to write some of those other values into the policy.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, so we have about 3 minutes left in this session. We have a question from Dr. Matzenbacher.
Yeah, Helen, thanks for being with us today. I have a question. How do we better engage in terms of farm to school, those communities, the Black, Indigenous, people of color that have limited access to food? And that is one of the challenges I think we have here in Louisiana.
It's a great question. And I will be totally transparent in saying at the national level, we're asking ourselves that very same question. I, am a white executive director running a majority white network right now. And so, yeah, I just want to fully transparently say that we're asking that same question about how to shift power. I think the most important thing, in my opinion, is to meet folks where they are. So even if that means not using the language farm to school, I don't know what capacity you all have, at LSU, for example, to do some like true community organizing work. So sitting down with communities that you're wanting to reach and hearing from them, like asking them what are the challenges that they're facing. And then through that, you're going to find the common ground to show how farm to school is going to be a strategy to address those challenges. But it may not be like saying, we want to bring this idea of farm to school to you, but rather saying like, what is it that you're facing? And I think you all, I talked about this in the keynote and you all know this. It's food access, it's the quality of food, it's poverty, it's hunger. So yeah, really meeting communities where they are is my best quick advice to you.
Great, thank you.
Very good, thanks.
I'm going to go ahead and end our poll for this session, and we are just about to wrap up. We're going to have a 10-minute break before our next session begins at 11:05, and that will be on COVID-19 and farm to school. So please stay tuned for that session in about 10 minutes.
And I'm going to chat to you all. Jamise Quayle is on the National Farm to School Network Advisory Board. Previously has done work in Pennsylvania and is now with EcoTrust in Oregon. She gave an amazing keynote in Vermont earlier in the summer. And Carl, just since I was quick on time, she did a phenomenal job answering that same question. So I'll chat that keynote to share with you all as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And all of our panelists should have the ability to send chats to other panelists as well as all of the attendees. So if you have a link that you want to share, put it there. And I'd also like to redirect our attendees to our conference program. The link should be in the chat. If you don't have it, it should be in your reminder email for the conference. And that has all kinds of resources that were sent to us from Helen, as well as resources for all of our other sessions sent by our speakers.